let's welcome designer, art director, and most importantly, Texan, DJ Stout.
Thanks, Graham. First of all, can I just say, are you guys crazy or what? Like, this is way too early to be doing this kind of stuff. So anyway, Ben asked me to do a presentation, as you've heard, about heritage. So I thought this would be a perfect time to talk about, since this is called Creative Mornings, to talk about my heritage and how it has really inspired me and has really formed my own work for the last 30-odd years. Basically, it all boils down to one big inspiration, which is this. And I'm sure you've seen this before. This is the state of Texas. Specifically, I'm actually from this place, Alpine, Texas. Alpine is in the Big Bend, and if you don't know where the Big Bend is, shame on you, but it's where the Rio Grande, when it's traveling down south on the Texas-Mexico border, it takes a big turn right there. So that's, a very Texas name. Well, that's a Big Bend. That's where my English partners keep thinking that I'm saying Big Ben, which is the big tower, in London. But the video that you just saw by J.B. Sauceda, the fantastic videographer and photographer here in town, that was actually filmed, those Cowboys were filmed just a few miles from where I was born. I was born in a little hospital in Alpine, Texas. This is my grandfather. He was a cowboy. I am a son of several cowboys. He was the real thing. He reminded me of John Wayne. He used to saunter around kind of like John Wayne. He liked to drink whiskey. He was like the Marlboro Man. He smoked all the time. He was named after a mule. So his name was Pat Armstrong. And so my son's name is Pat, just like Ben. So my son, who's 28 years old here in town, is also named after a mule. Now, my grandfather, like I said, he worked on ranches all over West Texas, but I used to sit on his lap and he would tell these Texas tales. Every now and then they would be slightly true, but he was a real storyteller like all cowboys. And so he would read this book to me, and I actually still have this book. I'm a book designer. I've been designing books for over 30 years. I love books, like old-fashioned books, you know, print on paper books. I don't know if you've seen those anymore, but I love those things. And this book, called The Book of Cowboys, was a big inspiration to me. I still think about this book all the time because it had these big, beautiful color illustrations. I love illustration, even today. It had what I think is sort of gorgeous typography, but it also had these wonderful little drawings around the margins all throughout the book, all about cowboy gear. This happens to be about saddles, but it was all drawn by hand. And so throughout my career at Texas Monthly and through Pentagram, I've done a lot of work that involved hand-drawn type. 50-odd years later, I ended up designing and writing my first book. I've designed hundreds of books, but this was the first one I ever actually wrote to. Happened to have the exact same title, Cowboys. However, this was not about the traditional Cowboys. This was about a baseball team called the Alpine Cowboys. This is another cowboy that was a big influence on my life, even though I've never met him. This man in the Stetson hat owned the Alpine Cowboys. He started the team in the 40s. He owned, at the time, the second largest ranch in Texas next to the King Ranch, called the 06 Ranch. But a huge working cattle ranch. The film you saw at the beginning of those two cowboys was actually shot at the 06 Ranch. It's still one of the largest ranches in the world. This man loved baseball, though. He loved baseball more than ranching. And I love that kind of change of stereotype. Like when you think of a cattle rancher, the last thing you think about is that somebody who loves baseball so much, that he starts a team. So in the 40s, he built what I think is still the field of dreams. He built the most beautiful baseball field. He spared no expense on a piece of his land near Alpine. It's called Coconut Field. When I was growing up, we always heard about Mr. Coconut, and my brothers and I always thought that my dad was talking about Mr. Coconuts. They called him Mr. Herbert. If you go to Alpine, you can still go to this baseball field. They still have the Alpine Cowboys still play there. I went there just over the 4th of July. I went to 3 games. It's still a pro team. This was a semi-pro team at the time, but you can go to this baseball field, and the 06 brand is all over the baseball field. And so this is the center field fence. But Mr. Herbert, as they called him, he was very wealthy, but he was very generous. So he paid his players very well. Some of them were high school players, some of them were college players. And semi-pro meant you could hire anybody if you had enough money. But he also, he would hire them to work on the ranch on the off season, but he also would pay their way through college. And one of those benefactors of that generosity was my father. So this is my dad when he was 19 years old. He's from Dallas. He had won the Texas State Championship over here at Disch-Falk Field, actually, in 1951. Mr. Coconut came out on the field after the game and said, "Doyle, what are you going to do with your life now?" My dad was like, "I have no idea." And he said, "Do you want to come to Alpine?" My dad was like, "Where's that? I'd be happy to go there." And so that's how my dad ended up in Alpine. So I wrote about that in my book. Like I said, he was from a low-income family. Mr. Coconut paid his way through college at Sul Ross University. He ended up getting his master's, and he's still working as a very successful businessman today. When the book came out, I had a big book launch party in Alpine. The mayor of Alpine came and welcomed all these ex-players who came from all over the country. And I wore Mr. Coconut's hat and his tie at this big event. So what was great about this book and doing this project was a way for me to work with my dad, understand my own family story about my heritage, but also it brought me back to my roots in the Big Bend. My parents met at Sul Ross. My mother was from Van Horn, Texas, which is a desolate little tiny town in the middle of nowhere. This is my mom and dad, a photograph of them on their first date in Big Bend National Park. My father, after his short-lived baseball career, he ended up joining the Marine Corps as an officer. And so my brothers and I, this is my brother John and me at my grandparents' house, we moved every single year. So even though I'm a fifth-generation Texan, I've kind of lived all over the country, and then I came back where my entire design career has been in Texas. But the one thing that I think is interesting is that Texas has always been a part of me, no matter where I lived. It's always been helped me and kind of guided me in the way I think. And so I really believe that in this world where everybody's trying to be global, I think when you embrace where you're from, it really helps you make decisions about design and everything else. So I'm a son of 3 cowboys, you could say, but I'm not a cowboy, obviously. And I usually never wear a hat, but I'm just doing it for drama. But I like the idea, that, I come from cowboys, but I am a graphic designer. These are not cowboys either. They're about the farthest thing from a cowboy there could be. This is a recent picture of my 19 Pentagram partners. Pentagram is a global company. We have a big office in London, we have an office in Berlin, big office in New York, San Francisco, and Austin. It makes Austin seem very global. But I will tell you that all of these partners who are from all over the world, it's a very international group. One of our newest partners is Natasha Jin. She's originally from Taiwan. Eddie Opara actually grew up in southwest London. And Emily Oberman actually is from Yonkers, New York, wherever the hell that is. But I love the name Yonkers. I just wanted to say Yonkers. But I will tell you, because I've been a partner for 15 years, that all of these partners are very influenced by where they're from, even though they're doing work all over the world. Pentagram's been around for 42, 43 years. We publish these papers. We have published these papers for a long time. They're called Pentagram papers. They're usually about a visual subject matter. I was assigned to do one. J.B. Saceda had gone out to Alpine and had photographed the Cowboy Poetry Gathering. So these are cowboys, but they're also poets. Once again, I love that idea that they're against the stereotype. You don't ever think of these guys as being literary. Now, cowboy poetry is corny as all get out. And some people would say that it's actually not high art. I disagree. I really love cowboy poetry. So we did a Pentagram paper. This was the cover. I worked with Stu Taylor, one of my fantastic designers, and we did this book featuring J.B. Saceda's photographs. It was a huge hit. I was kind of nervous about this when we first did it because this book, we do it for free, but it goes all over the world. It goes to all my partner in Berlin. It goes to all his clients. It goes to all the London clients. It goes to all this, all over the world. I thought they're going to think, first of all, that these poems are stupid, which some of them are. And the other thing, they're going to laugh at the way these guys look. Well, they loved it. And once again, it just shows the power of the Texas myth, I think. Now, this guy up on the upper left, Joel, he was in the video that I showed you at the very beginning. He's written this beautiful poem about horses.
I have run on middle fingernail through Eolithic morning. I have thundered down the coach road with the revolution's warning. I have carried countless errant knights who never found the grail. I have strained before the caissons. I have moved the nation's mail. I've made knights of lowly tribesmen and kings from ranks of peons. I have given pride and arrogance to riding men for eons. I have grazed among the lodges and the teepees and the yurts. I have felt the sting of driving whips, lashes, spurs, and quirts. I am roguish, I am flighty, I am inbred, I am lowly. I'm a nightmare, I am wild, I am the horse. I am gallant and exalted, I am stately, I am noble, I'm impressive, I am grand, I am the horse. I have suffered gross indignities from users and from winners, and I felt the hand of kindness from the losers and the sinners. I have given for the cruel hand and given for the kind, heaved a sigh at Appomattox when surrender had been signed. I can be as tough as hardened steel, as fragile as a flower. I know not my endurance, and I know not my own power. I have died with heart exploded neath the cheering in the stands, calmly stood beneath the hanging noose of vigilante bands. I have traveled under conqueror and underneath the beaten, yet I've never chosen sides. I am the horse.
Thanks, Dan. Thank you, Dan. So this is J. Frank Dobie. I'm sure you know who he is, a Texas folklorist. He did a lot to kind of promote the whole myth of Texas. All those photographs you just saw were taken by friends of mine, photographer friends that I've designed books for over the years. And I just love all that cowboy stuff. And J. Frank Dobie, what was interesting about him was that he was a cowboy, but he had very sort of liberal politics. He was a Democrat, and he was very Austin-like in a way. But he really believed in the power of regionalism, and so this is one of his quotes. I was the art director of Texas Monthly for about 13 years. That's the reason I moved to Austin. Texas is full of wonderful characters like Ann Richards. This was also a fake photograph that we did of Ann Richards on the motorcycle. So that's actually me, believe it or not, before my hair turned gray at the photo shoot. And this is these are two of the best-selling issues at Texas Monthly, and they're about two bigger-than-life Texas characters, Ann Richards and Joaquin Jackson, who actually is a very famous Texas Ranger from Alpine. They actually hate each other because Joaquin Jackson quit the Texas Rangers because Ann Richards, as governor, was forcing women into the force. And I love all the what we called at Texas Monthly the Texas myth, those things that are purely Texan, like bragging. Now, J. Frank Dobie, he really hated the fact that Texans brag. I actually love that. I think it's our sense of humor. I think it's like an inside joke. I think to some outsiders, they think it's uncouth and kind of tacky, but I actually love it. So this was a cover we did. Steve Peach did this illustration for our 20th anniversary. And I love all these things. Like this is the classic brag map. And so I was asked by Sappy Paper to do this national promotion. They sent me the Southwest. It was an outline of the Southwest. And I was supposed to fill it in, I guess. But of course, what I did was I made Texas bigger and then crammed in all the little states around it. And this is another version of that. Stu Taylor, again, helped me with this poster. This was a lecture I did in Vermont, so I basically was just making fun of how small Vermont is on that map. And then when I left Texas Monthly, I continued to work for them. But I love the myth about everything's bigger in Texas. So this was kind of a promotion we did. I wasn't doing the magazine anymore. Scott Dadich was the art director, but it was that idea that these big, giant issues of the magazine, everything's bigger in Texas. And I love Big Tex, because he's big. And he's also weird looking. He's really strange. So Big Tex inspired me on this project that we did. This was for the city of Lexington, where we created this giant blue horse and this legend around it, because this is horse country, but it's bluegrass country. So we called him Big Lex, of course. So you can see, even though I'm doing work all over the country, that I'm always inspired by Texas. We've done work for the Texas Book Festival last 3 or 4 years. This was a wonderful painting by Mark Burkhart, an Austin illustrator, and this was kind of a reference to the wildfires that had happened out in Alpine and in Fort Davis, so back to where I'm from. This was a photo essay from Texas Monthly all about the Texas rodeo. It was the largest photo essay ever published in Texas Monthly. So once again, everything's bigger in Texas, but this was done by Mary Ellen Mark. People hated this photo essay because it wasn't the cliche. The photographs were not about the cliche rodeo pictures. What she was fascinated with was the parades and the small town. And this is one of my favorite pieces I've ever done. There are symbols in Texas, like the cowboy hat, I think, is worn by people all over the country, all over the world. You know, there's just as many cowboy hats, or probably more, in Montana than there is in Austin, Texas, except for the one I was wearing. So this was a book jacket we were asked to do. Very easy. It was about the influence Texas has on the world and United States politics. All we did was just found an old photo of the Washington Monument and put a hat on it. And once again, here's the cowboy hat thing, and I love big hair. So this lady actually sent me a letter when I was at Texas Monthly with a snapshot. It said, "Dear Mr. Stout, I love to wear my hair in the shape of a cowboy hat." And it gave me this idea to put her on the cover and then to do a whole photo essay. This is a magazine we do in Southern California, and there's a recent cover. So once again, you can see how big hair is kind of influencing the way we think. This was designed by Barrett Fry. And Big Hair in Africa. This was a big, oversized publication we did for the Museum of Fine Arts, all about African art. And a poster about, for Turk Pipkin, who is a philanthropist here, as you know, him and Christy, who have been building these schools in Africa. This happens to be in Kenya. Once again, you can see where that influence of hand-drawn type is kind of showing itself again. And this is a book about the history of Japanese photography. What I love about this book is it was done by Ann Tucker at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston. It was the first time that anybody ever done a history of Japanese photography. And I love the fact that it was a Texan that did that, not somebody in Japan. And a magazine that we did recently for the Times of London. This is called the Times Education Supplement, where I think we kind of infuse this with, I think, a Texan sense of humor, this publication. And then we do the World Wildlife Fund magazine. It's called World Wildlife. This is actually done by Carla Delgado, who's here also from my office. But what I love about this is a magazine that goes out to the entire world, but it's done from Austin, Texas. And this is we have this music culture here. This is a lyric book that we did. Stu Taylor helped me with this as well, for Darden Smith, a fantastic musician here. And we use these photographs by Kate Brakey, and there's something about that snake that always just reminds me of the Rio Grande and the Big Bend. Really beautiful. And then back to my own community, back to Austin. This was another pentagram paper we did about homelessness. Michael O'Brien took these photographs of the homeless people, and the signs that they hold were photographed by Randall Ford. And that became a book. This guy actually stands on a corner about 2 blocks from our office almost every day. Now he's on the cover of this book. And the poems were written by Tom Waits. So here's a book about our community. These are homeless people. We use this as a fundraiser to help the homeless. But then we got, like, world-class musician like Tom Waits to write poems about homelessness. And so talking about this community, I feel like Austin now is kind of like a city of immigrants. I really do. I think that people are pouring in here from all over the world. My wife and I, Lana, we do this thing called Pecha Kucha, which is actually a speaking format that came over from Tokyo. But it always features 10 interesting people. And these people, like here, are just from all over the world. And I love the fact that they're all here in Austin, which is the capital of Texas. So one of these really great people that I met was Graham Reynolds, who's become a very good friend of mine. And I really appreciate, Graham, you doing this with me, since I'm doing all the talking and you're not doing that much. But anyway, as Ben said, Graham's done all these amazing cultural things. Like he's done scores for, this was Amazing Ballet, done by the Austin Ballet. This was a Alison Orr's ballet where she photographed the trash trucks. It's called Trash Dance. These are just three movies that Graham's done the scores for. If you haven't seen Bernie yet, you've got to see that. And the music is just fantastic. And same with Before Midnight. It's just beautiful. Well, what I think is interesting is where I came from, from Cowboys. Graham is from Connecticut, so he's a damn Yankee. And so here's a photograph of him in his troubled years. He was mad because he was living up there in New England. And so the thing is, where I'm from has inspired me. Where Graham is, he was very inspired by punk music. But now he's one of the most creative talents in this entire city. So we basically have paired up together. It's the cowboy and the punk. Thank you very much.